Thank you for joining us for today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. My guests are subject matter experts whose unique perspectives will help listeners understand how the issues impact them. Let's get into The Real Spill. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of The Real Spill here on the Multifamily Media Network. And with me today is one of my favorite people in multifamily that I just met almost a year ago. It's almost been a year. So welcome, Tess Vogler.
Hello, hello.
So I'm so glad you could join me today.
Me too. I'm very, very excited. And this is a great way to catch up because we're so far away.
I know. And just thinking, seeing you most recently at the Assembly of Delegates conference in Atlanta and looking forward to Advocate, I thought it would be fun for listeners to learn how we actually met at Advocate last year. You want to tell the story?
Yeah, of course. So last year was my first Advocate. So for me, I am a roll with the punches kind of gal. For me, it was, I have no problem speaking to people. It's my personality, just a people person. But my cohort and I had basically no idea what to expect or what to do. It was our association's first time really sending people to Advocate. So we had kind of gathered for the first timers session, so we weren't sweating and freaking out the whole time. And we actually ended up getting paired with you to pitch to you what we were going to talk to lawmakers about. And my cohort Harriet, she's wonderful. She's very much so like me, very much a people person. She's our legislative chair at Apartments of New York. So I think she was a little more familiar, but I kind of was like, okay, so here's my personal story. I've never done this before. And you gave me like just incredible tips on not being scared. I think that's the first thing that people think about when they're like, oh, I'm going to go talk to a lawmaker. It's terrifying. It's very terrifying to just have those moments and realize the actual depth of what you're doing. And so we kind of pitched to you what we thought would work. And you had great pointers, mostly slow down, which is still a work in progress for someone like me. I do talk quite fast, but it was cool. It's when you go to Advocate the first time, you've got a lot of different resources helping you understand the issues that NAA is really focused on. I think that the other part of it is kind of your association, really going back to your association and your association kind of understanding what you need to be successful in this. So I'm very glad I met you at that. And then, just by serendipitously, of course, I show up at Rawls and there you are. And I was like, wait a second. I know you, right? And we kind of just connected from there, but really just that first initial meeting, pitching to a stranger, which your lawmakers, most of the time, like I would say 99% of the time, are a stranger to you. So it was pitching, this really personal story about how legislation could affect the area that I lived in to a stranger, and actually having you being receptive and kind was awesome, of course. But it was also nice to, have someone with their sea legs, walking you through some little tips and tricks on it. So.
Well, it was awesome. I was so glad to be able to be there and help you and Harriet when I'd kind of walked over and was like, okay, what's going on? Like, oh my gosh, you guys are brand new. And I could only imagine, because you guys were the only one from your affiliate, the only two people there.
Yeah, from the state.
From the state. Okay.
Of New York.
Oh my gosh, that is insane to me.
Yeah, so we definitely had kind of our hands full in that regard. A big push in New York is to try to get everyone in the same, on the advocacy side. There's different regions of every state, but there are very distinct regions of New York. Of course, you've got the city, as everyone New York City would call it, and then you have upstate New York, which is kind of my association's area of expertise. So it was really Harriet and I approaching all the lawmakers in New York and just getting their information or getting the information of their housing coordinator saying, this is really what NAA stands for and what's we're standing on. And we would love for you to, get on board with us. I think a lot of the policies at the time were more in line with what people in New York really felt passionate about. So it was a little bit of an easier in, but it was still pretty crazy for the first time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. How did those first meetings go? Like, how was your overall first advocate experience? I mean, it was baptism by fire. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it was great. I think that what was really impactful for me is that we didn't have a meeting with my actual representative from my constituency. But we did have a meeting with Harriet's, which was really, really engaging. But I did get to meet with a staff member for my district and really connect with this person. And the funny thing is he actually grew up 2 houses from the house I own. So he was very well aware of the challenges in the area that I live in, how these bills could really affect that, and how that could roll into bigger change. So that was really, really encouraging. For Harriet's district, I think that they have different challenges. Of course, it's a more rural area, so there's less housing. Which is what we were talking about, having more incentives to build in those areas. And I think, her representative was very receptive to understanding what we actually do, and really taking that to heart and reviewing the laws that we brought to him and trying to understand them. And he had very engaging questions. So, I mean, and the others, of course, a lot of it is you're walking into a lawmaker's office. They have staffers. And at that point, if you can't get a meeting, you can always get those contacts. You can always really build a little baby foundation with them so that when you're coming back year after year, you've got a wide breadth of information. So it's definitely trial by fire, but it's really, really incredible to watch all of these states and all of these people in our industry come together and really become the voice of their companies, of their residents, things like that. So it's really, really impactful. And it was insane and beautiful at the same time. It's definitely a dynamic experience.
Oh, for sure. I think dynamic is a great word to describe it. And it sounds like you guys got the best of both worlds where you got a great situation there with the staffer, like finding like a staffer who gets it.
Yeah.
And especially one that's, I mean, 2 doors down. I mean, it's another serendipitous kind of situation there.
Yeah,
A lot of their
absolutely.
staff are from the district. And sometimes they came from the district office and ended up moving up to DC. And that's amazing. And then for her representative to have great questions and be engaging. It's great to see how it can work meeting with the actual member versus meeting with a staffer. Both can be very, very informative and influential.
Yeah, for sure. I think too, it is a little scary at first. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's a little scary. It's a little intimidating to know that this is a person who, especially if it's your constituency specifically, this is the person who is signing things, who is listening to the proposals of your city or your state. This is it's very interesting, but it's very scary at first because you don't know what to expect. You haven't met these people. A lot of the time, you've voted for them because of a policy or an issue if you're an issue voter, but you've never met them, right? So now you're walking into their like inner sanctum and saying, "Hi, I actually live. I'm a person you actually represent." It's a really powerful thing being involved in the legislative process in that way and really showing up for yourself, for the people in your districts, for anyone that you serve. It's really, really impactful.
Yeah, it's amazing because I don't know, and I've said this before, how many people get the opportunity to say that they have lobbied the halls of Congress for the industry that they support or that supports them. I get emotional, I get misty every time I say that because it is such a dynamic experience. Like you said, like to go in or to, when you go into Cannon House and Rayburn House and Todd Whitlow we have a sister firm, Brownlee Whitlow and Prate. Todd pointed up to the rafters and said, that's where they film Meet the Press. And now if I'm watching on the weekend, you can recognize the different places. And even, if you've ever taken a tour of the Capitol where they had the inauguration, like I was sending my family pictures because I was there the week the world shut down, and 2020 was my first Advocate. And we were there where history was taking place, whether
Yeah.
someone's been there in person or just seen pictures. If they ever have the chance, I would say just to go, like sign up,
Oh, yeah.
go. Like, and the conference is free, and so folks are able to go. And a lot of times, like what I did before, I worked for a company that would fully support. You're sharing rooms with your friends. You're
Yep.
making it work for that week, and it's just such a cool experience. And it's crazy to think that it's a little over 30 days away now.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And we go because we're the experts, and we get to talk to the members of Congress. And we start our expertise in the industry by starting our careers in multifamily. Can you tell listeners how you found yourself in the multifamily industry?
Yeah, I think that this is a common answer by accident. I think most people just get into it by accident. At the time, I was working in digital media. And at that point, I was really heavily focused on sales, which obviously in multifamily, you have to be a salesperson, right? But I was more focused on the sales portion as well as some of the actual digital backgrounding. So for me, I really missed the the human connection that wasn't sales. I really wanted to know people, to serve them. I had a servant's heart. I always have. I wanted that tactile relationship. And so I kind of was like, well, I'll just apply to this job. And I was interviewed for it, and I didn't think that the manager liked me, so I kind of have had moved past that when I got a call back, and he said, "Come on over." And then from there, I was in charge of you know two separate sites. I was working with our corporate office, things like that, because I really, when I fell into it, I didn't realize how much I loved it until I moved my first person in, and they had been homeless for 2 years, and they didn't tell me that until the day they got their keys. And I was like, this is my dream job, because this is what I did not have access to housing as a young person. And so when all of that happened, it felt very intentional, like universally intentional. But then I accidentally fell in, and then as we all do, I was there for a while, and then I was like, you know what, I'll try something different, something new. For 1 year. And so I transitioned into tourism marketing, which is actually very similar to what I do now for our communities. That's all about location, about price, about, I can't necessarily say your comfort level with where you are, but what is around you in the space that you're looking to live, that can enrich your life. So enriching travel and enriching life are very, very similar. And then the world ended, and then COVID. So I actually was laid off from that very wonderful job. I loved my coworkers. I loved the position, but it's a very small, small office, and that's kind of what happens. And then I moved to New York, and then right back into multifamily, right back into, having the honor to provide housing to people, and I haven't left since.
That's awesome. It is such a personal thing to provide someone with home. And just to know that that person had been experiencing homelessness. I mean, that just, that's what it's all about. Something that it's an essential need of humanity, and to be able to provide that very just personal, just that's their refuge. It's just what makes our industry so cool. So
Yeah,
cool.
you get to hold their memories. That's the other part of it. I always talk about the movie Inside Out, where they have the little globes of memories, right? So a lot of those memories center around where you are in your home. So we get to be, we get to hold those alongside our residents, and that is so special, and something that if you don't take it seriously, then you should not be in this industry. It is very, very serious. It is an honor. And even on the days where it's really, really hard, there is someone coming home at the end of the day and sitting on their couch and taking their first deep breath of the day. And that's what we get to provide, especially when you look at these companies trying to really do better in the areas of customer experience, resident experience. those final deep breaths at the end of the day are what we were created for to manage that. So it's really incredible.
It is. It is out of I used to think, and I would tell folks out of everywhere, I'm in the upstate of South Carolina, in the upstate that you could have chosen, you chose my community. And it's my responsibility and that of my teams to remind you of why at every interaction. They could have chosen anywhere, but they chose us. And we're there to remind them of why they chose us. And resident experience is everything because at the end of the day, I remember training a new person and saying, they're all boxes in the sky, so to speak. It's
Yep.
what makes those boxes special and unique. And a lot of times it's those of us that are on the front lines, like yourself, you're out there digital, you're marketing, you're seeing an inside scoop as to what it's going to be like to live in that community. It has to be really cool to see it from that side now too.
Yeah, it's great. It's especially when you have, property managers and other team members who want to engage socially with residents and want them to see who they are behind the desk, right? If you walk in and you see a property manager behind the desk, there's probably like six drinks. There's probably keys everywhere. They might look a little stressed, beautifully dressed, but stressed, but they really are intentional about helping people see beyond the desk, which is super impactful. And it really does speak to, what community you're moving to and what you chose. So I think it's really, really cool in that way.
Oh yeah, I used to like to tell them like, I want you to know the person and not the title.
Yep.
And that way, because it's not a matter of if something's going to, I don't want to say go wrong, but stuff happens. Like
Yeah.
if they have that rapport, they're going to be more likely to come and talk to you instead of going like right to social and, oh, I can't believe this happened today. They're going to go talk to you because they look to you as the professional, as the one who can help them and whatever the situation is. And sometimes they just want to be heard. They don't want anything else in the world but just to be heard for that moment. And we wear so many hats. We didn't know we were getting into therapy when we did
Yeah.
this.
No therapy. I did not know that I was going to learn so much about bugs.
Oh yeah,
I don't want to know, but here we are. Jeopardy, call me. I have many useless facts, useful in our industry. Maybe not so much for, like a party trick, but definitely opens your horizons in that way.
for sure. And now, when did you first learn that industry advocacy was a thing? Like, what first piqued your interest to say, I wonder what that's about. I want to learn more.
Yeah, so it's kind of uninteresting. I'm just going to be direct. I'm sitting in a room full of leaders, and they're talking about ERAP and other payments that were coming through in the COVID era, and how the actual written law was very vague, and they couldn't figure it out, and the lawyers were having trouble figuring it out. And I was like, I may not have the knowledge, but I do have the audacity to look at this and try to read through it. And when I started reading through it, I was like, no wonder nobody can figure it out. This is not realistic. So I had been thinking about that for a while. And then I was actually approached by my association to do a guide to good cause eviction, because that's a big thing that happened here in New York in certain municipalities. And so when I started making that guide and we started sending it out to members, and they had all these questions and they needed, who is lobbying for us? They had all these questions that I had never thought of. So from that was the moment where I was like, I really want to know everything that's going on. I want to understand the legal processes more. I want to know where we can be better, or how we can relay this information to our residents in a way that's safe, in a way that's communicative and honest, and that so that they can come and ask us questions. It was really more my innate curiosity and wondering how I could make this easier for our teams and our residents to digest.
And when was that? Was that during the pandemic or right after the
Oh
pandemic?
gosh. So that was late 2022, early 2023. We had been fighting good cause eviction here in New York for a really long time, not because we are the mean landlords that everyone thinks we are. And, we call ourselves housing providers. We don't say the word landlord. But it wasn't because of that. It was because there was not equal protection. And that's really what what we all strive for. We want our residents to be protected. We want them to have the avenues that they need to get assistance if they need it, or to come and talk to us, have those open conversations. So it was really important. And at the time, too, it was trying to help owners understand what the legislation really meant, because there was a lot of swirling information that wasn't correct. So, it was really for those purposes, but it kind of just lit a fire in me, because I'm inherently a researcher. I'm inherently like a data analyst kind of person. I like to see what and why and how. And that was really the start of it.
And it's amazing. You still see good calls. Like I've subscribed to all the Google search words. That's one thing I've had to do in this new role is if it happens relating to the industry. And I see a lot of good calls like New York, Pennsylvania, like it's all over. Would you want to tell listeners a little bit about what that is if they don't understand? Is it evicting for a good cause, like the reasoning for the eviction?
Yeah, so it does give residents a little bit longer time period to find representation if they feel it's necessary, or to find a new living situation if that's needed. But it also does require a good cause for an eviction that is larger. It is more a bigger picture of what the reason is. And there's also the ability for people to contest. So, which is totally fine. There are many other nuances, but it really depends on your district, what judge you have. It depends on all of those things. So it's not as black and white as we would prefer it to be. So that's kind of where it's been leaning. It is, of course, it is different for every state. It's different for every area, really. It has great bones, and it has things that we really are passionate about on the resident side, but there definitely could be more protections for housing providers in it. So,
Well, thank you for that explanation. I think as people are listening and they hear these words, it's important to give them some context and to know what's going on all over the country. And I find it so interesting that it's not just in South Carolina that there's no uniformity in the court system. It's all over the
everywhere.
country.
Yeah.
I think that was a misconception that I had because I managed the property I last managed from 2013 to 2021. And I only knew my little niche, my little area. And I knew that judge and he applied the statute. And when I started working for the firm and we are all over the state and multiple states and learning like, oh, that's how they do it here. That's how they do it there. I'm like, but the statute's the same in the state. And it's all the interpretation of the law. So it's really cool that you got to be involved in helping to interpret and lay it out for the owner operators how to apply this within their community so that they could make sure that they were in compliance and were abiding by the good cause eviction rules.
Yeah, and a lot of that is an addition of, your communications to residents. You have to give them resources. You have to help them understand, you know, what what applies to them, what rights they do have. And we are all about housing providers are all about residents knowing their rights, and housing providers knowing their rights. That's the foundation of the housing industry. Is we all deserve to know our rights in that regard. And so it was a lot of helping people understand their rights. And then, just trying to see both sides of the point of view. It's really, we talk a lot about, our country is a two-party system at the moment, but beyond that, we're a people system. So and then the people system, if you are involved in any way in the world or in your state, there are certain things that apply to you. There are certain rights that you have. They vary state to state, and everyone has the right to know those things. So, and it's an honor to get to tell people those things and to learn about them and understand maybe where someone was coming from, even if you disagree with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with our residents too, it's something that I've heard time and time again when I have multifamily leaders like yourself on the podcast. It's we represent the vast majority of housing providers in the nation in that same thought pattern there. That whole, we want you to be informed. We want you to make informed decisions as residents. We can be that liaison between you and ERAP funds, depending on where they're coming down from, and to help them get allocated properly so that they can maintain their housing. Like, we're not in there like, oh, we gotcha. Ah, ha, ha.
Yeah,
We're not in there, twiddling the mustache kind of thing, like, "Mwah, we've got over on you."
right.
We want them to know what's in it for them and how we can help them. And I think sometimes the narrative that's out there about housing providers, like I said, I subscribe to all these search words, and sometimes you see the bad actors. So I think it's so important to spotlight the majority of members who are doing it right, doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we met at the Advocacy Academy. How did you hear that this was going to be a thing? How did you get involved with that?
Yeah, like I said, I'm kind of a nerd. I love research, data, all of that. So I actually just got an email that said there was an advocacy academy. It was definitely the first round of it, I believe, was kind of focused on those who had attended Advocate before to kind of give them an idea of what the academy would be. But for me, I really, as soon as I saw it, I applied because I knew that I had been to Advocate. I had seen the impact that was possible, but I knew that with more training and more intention, I could definitely be on the front lines of making that happen. And I was crossing my fingers and toes that I would get in because it's something that is, of course, it's the first class. It's the first the inaugural class. So for me, I just went directly to it, and I was ready to go because it's important to me. It's important to me to understand the world that I live in and the industry that I live in. So I kind of just went for it.
Now, what was the process like for you when you got there? What did you like, expectations versus what it really was? What were your takeaways?
I didn't really have any expectations of the academy besides like really talking about lawmakers and the processes of advocating, of going into, all of these buildings to, how do you present yourself? How can you make what you're feeling or what you believe in come across in a way that is digestible for everyone? I really, honestly, it was incredible. I walked away with not only like, of course you make connections, of course you make friends, but beyond that, the perspectives that are in the room with you. This is like 30 people who all have a different perspective. Even if they know one another, they still have this different perspective. It wasn't just a housing provider. It wasn't just marketing people. There were, marketing people. There were operational people. There were insurance people. There were multiple people in the room who made it easier to understand how personal stories really affect people's view of the law, how it affects, how it can affect a lawmaker, and how the contextualization of legalese is really powerful, which that sentence sounded crazy, but it is so important. It wasn't just sitting down and being like, this is how you talk to lawmakers. It was a dynamic view of this is what this law means. This is how the brain chemistry of people in these positions work. This is how you can touch those people emotionally. This is how you can get them interested in what you're saying. You can be professional, but you can still bring your personality into this. I have a very big personality as I look, but not everyone has my personality. So the ability for those who are maybe a little more introverted to bring their personality, bring their personal stories into their advocacy. I mean, just meeting the people that I did, incredible. I can't say enough good things about the people in that room. And they have all gone on to do things at the local, the state, the federal level that have really spoken to, the industry moving forward. But I had no expectations. The expectation was I was going to show up and I was going to learn. And I definitely did both of those things, but really came out of it with more than just knowledge. I came in with, came out with like these practical ways that I could approach just lawmaking in general. And so I can't say enough good things about it. It leaves you speechless a little bit, especially at the end when you've built a relationship with these people, you've spent time working through things with them, and you've really learned about their advocacy styles because everyone's different. So really taking, tips and tricks from people who have been to advocate 7 times, and then somebody like me who's been once, or, there are so many different points of view that make it better because the world is points of views. That's all the world is. It's just different points of views, right? So by being in a room with all these different people, say you walk in and your lawmaker is more introverted, right? For me, I'm going to adjust how I'm telling my story. I'm not going to go, I'm not going to go at them hard. I'm not going to make it crazy. I'm going to keep my tone low, really reflect their personality type so that they're not distracted by my personality. They're hearing the facts and they're moving forward with it, or they're hearing my opinion or what we feel is important, especially with NAA. They're trying to get them to hear exactly how these laws affect our industry and not having them distracted by a personality type or a language barrier or things like that.
Yeah, I thought it was neat too, hearing how the lawmakers' day is set up. Like that, we have just such a very small amount of time to make that impression. And I know Seth had talked about doing more of like having distractions during the meetings and that kind of thing, where somebody comes in and they're all distracted, and it's neat that we were able to see like a little bit of what their day looks like too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's busier than you think, and those staffers work tirelessly to, they are as big of a part of us as of the team as the representative is. It's very, there are a million behind the scenes people that we were not told are involved or important. But I always try to live by the janitor theory. You don't know if the janitor knows the CEO or knows Britney Spears, right? So you treat everyone with kindness, regardless of who they know. But it's also, this was a really big, it was very eye opening to understand how much time, love, effort, all of that is put into these specific representatives' days.
I thought so too. And knowing that there was a method to the madness, like Seth was saying, sometimes we're flying the plane as it's being built. And that was somewhat of my story of how I got into advocacy. I just, so much of it, when you're meeting with the lawmakers, like meeting with a new prospective resident, where we have all the information on the community, and in this case, the industry. And then you're a chameleon. When you're in sales, you're a chameleon. Like you're
Yep.
matching energy, so to speak. And so, like we kind of talked off camera a little bit, depending on the dynamic, you might talk to one person versus the other, or if you know one person has a specific experience, like just even having your group of people have their own respective roles to play during the meeting, that who's going to be the note taker, who has the personal story. And I didn't realize we were going to get so deep into the storytelling, which I thought was so dynamic. And just hearing y'all's stories, I'm not going to pressure you to tell, but if you'd like to, you're of course more than welcome. We had dealt with the Choice and Affordable Housing Act to revitalize the Housing Choice Voucher Program. That's been the piece of legislation that's been the hardest to obtain co-sponsors for. And even to date, to my knowledge, there's not a lot of co-sponsors for that piece of legislation. So I understand why they put such emphasis on it. But just hearing everyone's story, I know if I were a lawmaker, I'm a big softie anyway. I would just be like,
Me
yes,
too.
I'll co-sponsor. How can I help?
Of course. Yeah, I think, you know, that one was one of the most eye-opening things that I brought back to my company. NAA had made a fact sheet that showed the process, the voucher process. And when I brought it back, my team members were like, "What is that?" And I said, "This is what you expect the property managers to do, and this is the experience of that prospect." And they were like, "Why would you do this?" And I said, "That's the point." There, and a lot of the frustrations that I was seeing on site, the things that I was hearing from my property managers, in regards to that were, this takes too long, this makes no sense, I can't get an inspector, I'm holding out, I'm not getting my, we've got a vacant unit sitting for 14 days because we can't get an inspector. It's not the resident, it's not the prospect's fault that this is happening. All of those things, right? And we have this unique perspective because we're sitting on site, we're on the other side of the phone saying, I'm so sorry, we don't have an inspector yet. I'm so sorry. I can't help you with this. I can't be that support that you need from someone in the housing industry because I have no control over that portion of either regulation or of the process. So I think that's a lot of our stories were centered around these people that we had met who desperately needed housing for whatever reason besides it's a human right, but we had talked so much about these really hard situations where you're put in a position where you have to say, I'm so sorry, I can't hold this any longer, I can't and then you have your ownership who maybe doesn't understand the process at all and is pressuring you to move on or move forward, and there's not anything most of the time that you can do. So those personal stories about those situations really, really were impactful and really pulled your heartstrings. But more than that, they are real stories. You can make up a story all day, but when we were telling our stories, there was so much passion in the room. There was so much intention. We really truly do care about our prospects, our residents. We care about your living experience. Even if it seems like we don't, there are a lot, like I keep saying, there are a lot of behind the scenes people who make things work. And we just happen to be on the front line and behind the scenes pushing for these things, but without legislation to back that, we don't have much standing. And I know some communities have more resources than others, and that's fantastic, but it definitely needs to be an equitable spread. It needs to be a more intentional process. And we all know that bureaucracy can make things unintended, like unnecessarily difficult. And that's kind of what we were trying to fight was, this is so difficult for no reason, and it's affecting our industry and it's affecting human beings in the world who need places to live. So it's just really, really impactful with those personal stories.
Oh, yeah, and to be able to say, we're leaving Americans unhoused unnecessarily.
Yep.
That is something that I took away from that bill, and something that I used. I had a meeting with South Carolina District 1 Representative Nancy Mays. She's running for governor. It's going to be interesting to see
Yeah.
how that goes. And sidebar, but this is to me interesting too. Against Thomas Ravenel. I don't know if you watch Southern Charm. I'll
Uh-huh.
leave it there. It's it's going to be an
Interesting.
interesting race. I mean, like it's going to be very, very interesting to see. But I used that same verbiage with her: is we're leaving Americans unhoused unnecessarily. And when you've gone and you've been part of something like the Advocacy Academy, and then you come back on site and you have that thing happen again where you're like, I'm sorry. How interesting, or how, I'm going to say cool, but is it to be able to say, and I'm on the front lines trying to do something about it? If
Yeah.
you want to do something about it too, go to your statehouse.gov, look up your representative, call and ask them to support this piece of legislation to make it better, because I'm out there meeting with our members of Congress to ask them for change, and
Yeah.
it's not happening. And just to tell them, well, we take it a step farther. We care so much that we want to learn how to effectively advocate not only for owner operators, supplier partners, but for them.
Yeah. Absolutely. It is holistically for the prospects and residents, and it's holistically for human beings that need housing, which is everyone.
Now, did you have any meetings after the Advocacy Academy had concluded to where you were able to put what you learned into action?
So I talked a little bit to the city council where I live, which seems like very small fish, but when you operate in those communities, it's big fish. And they were very much so interested and possibly a little confused that a young person was coming to them and saying, and talking to them about a big piece of legislation. There is a lot of people really underestimate other human beings, but specifically young people, of their knowledge of how the world and how laws work. So it was a little surprising to them, but I felt that it was you're taken more seriously. I'm not saying the most serious, but I was taken more seriously because I walked in and I said, Representative Morelli is in support of this. How can I be a voice in this community to get this up to the state level? How can I be involved in that way? And just going to a city council meeting, which when I worked in tourism marketing, I was a part of the Chamber of Commerce. So a lot of that it includes watching laws come to fruition in your neighborhoods and things like that. So it was more inherent to me than I think it is to others, possibly, but it was really impactful. It was really interesting, and to actually learn the city council members because I didn't know who they were. And then, coming back to another city council meeting where something I was involved with won an award was another thing because I said, "Hey, they're like, "Oh, you're the housing girl." Sure. If that's what you want me to be, that's who I am. So, I had some interactions there. Now, my specific representative had already voted in our favor. So there was a little less groundwork to do to kind of push that narrative forward continually. But watching him get reelected was amazing. Watching, the process and understanding that and knowing that things that I had said to him and to his staffer had actually made a difference was really, really impactful.
Oh, yeah, being able to get that alert from like congress.gov that representative or senator such and such just co-sponsored the bill like after a meeting is like one of the coolest things ever. And something you said is really very true. The city and county council, that's where it's at. Like that's really and truly like I think as an industry, we do a great job on the federal level. This is something I'm working on in South Carolina too. It's just difficult as a volunteer on the local level. I feel like we need a paid person. But to go to those meetings because so many of those ordinances are taking place within the community in which you live. And that's why it's important. And when you said, hey, there's the housing girl, that's what we want. We want to be known
Yeah.
as the expert. So that is like chef's kiss that they're seeing you as the housing girl. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's one of the reasons the Advocacy Academy existed is to make us known as the housing experts. And really that's on every level of government.
Yeah, for sure.
All it takes is bad policy, just a whiff, and people don't understand. And then it's all of a sudden it's not just in this municipality or this community, but now it's in that one. And if we're not out in front of these things, actively trying to educate on what the multifamily industry is and who we are, then we're going to have bad policy in place. And these folks that are on city and county council, their next step a lot of times is the state house or the assembly, the Senate, and then they go for federal. And then all of a sudden, it rolls up and it rolls back down.
Yep. Every time.
Yeah. Now, where you are, what are the specific challenges you're seeing like in New York right now? What are some things that are on the top of everyone's mind?
Yeah, I think this is probably a national issue, to be honest. The current economic turmoil that we're feeling, the shockwaves that we feel every year when there's a new person in the White House. I think that what's happening with that is that everyone has started to prepare for economic change or hardship, inflation, things like that. So you're seeing a highly concessed market, no matter where you are. This is all concession driven. And normally we would say, well, it's winter. Of course it's concession driven. What else are we going to do? But this is different than it has been in the years prior. You're seeing a lot of, the Fed rates. You're kind of seeing some changes there, positive and negative changes there with the Fed. So all of that is really leading into these concession-driven markets, and it makes everything more competitive and more expensive for all of us. So, earlier we were talking about supply chain issues. Those still exist. They definitely exist in areas that have been hit by natural disasters. Those are huge issues that we're all seeing, but also we're trying to see. What I see a lot of is that companies are disregarding the resident experience and only focusing on a prospect experience, right? So we're focusing top of funnel. Once they get to the bottom of the funnel, we kind of just forget about them, right? It's the set and forget mentality. And that creates huge challenges among different communities. It creates huge challenges among the industry because now when a resident has a bad experience, that's a ripple effect. So then you start seeing different groups of people saying, well, I would never rent an apartment again. All of them are slumlords. All of them are. So they're forgetting the principal purpose. And that is leading to everything else. You can give me 2 months free rent, but if the second I move in, you forget about me and you're not checking in with me, not seeing if there's anything you can do, all the sentiment that I had for you goes away. And then the first time something bad happens, it's gone. So I think that the challenge comes from a misinformed, misguided type of function of operating. It's dysfunctional to forget about your inset customers. We are not like retail. We are not anywhere like retail because we have the forever customer. They come into our offices every day. We talk to them. We interact with them. They are maybe not forever, but for us in the moment, that's a forever customer. It's not the same as someone who comes, grabs a new purse and leaves. It's not the same. So we've been treating this the same way for years, for 20, 30 years. And now we're to the point where all of those decisions and all of that lack of listening to what was happening in our communities is now coming to fruition, and we're seeing the effects of it in the market. It's just the truth. And I think companies that are not addressing the truth and finding pain points and addressing them, they will no longer be companies in the next 5, 10 years. You have to have the acumen, the intention. You have to go back to your why. Why are you in the industry? Why do you wake up in the morning and show up to your offices? Why do you wake up in the morning and complete an acquisition? You've got to get back to that basis. And the basis is housing, but the challenges continue due to lack of intentional care.
I would tend to agree there with you and seeing those challenges just all over. And two, if the whole thing is filling vacancy, if you take care of the people you have who have the option as to whether or not they're going to move,
Yeah,
you wouldn't
then
have to
you
fill the vacancies.
won't have vacancy, right? And it's more about creating community than creating monetary gain.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
And that's
has to
how,
be.
yeah, that's how I trained the teams that I had over the years, and hearing some of them go on and, say, oh, I work for someone now. And they're like, oh, well, Katie was all about the resident experience, about the residents. And then they asked, well, the manager said, well, what am I about? All about the money. And I'm like, oh, and they'll tell me sometimes, I quit learning the day that you left. And it breaks my heart because it's gotten that it's transactional. That's how they're treating the industry as though it's a transactional industry. And it's not. It's absolutely not. If we're losing our empathy for our fellow human being, which is we're here, we're called to a greater purpose. If you're in this, and especially if you have the sphere of influence to have a team around you, your attitude and how you are portraying the industry is what's going to stick with them. And then they're going to potentially go on to be leaders. And that begets new blood, but we're not training them in the mindset that is going to provide for the longevity of the industry. And it's like the whole take care of your people, they'll take care of your bottom line kind of thing. And same thing with the industry. You've got to take care of the residents and said making those memories. And I have so many, people probably get me for this, but that are on my Facebook that have been for years. And that I was able to see, you see their kids grow up, you see their pets, you just remember these things. You have your events and you have your pictures pop up from events. And those are those core memories for generations to come. And I think the industry would, be good to practice the pause sometimes and just rethink, like you said, why am I doing this? What's my why? Why am I here every day? Because once we've lost track of that, in my opinion, it's time to move on, because then you're creating more harm than good within the communities that you serve.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Now, what makes you the most proud to serve the industry? I know you just light up from within, like your heart is in it, like you're walking in your purpose.
Yeah, there's so many things that make me proud about being a housing provider. There's so many things. But I think that I'll give it two ways. Internally to the industry, I'm so happy and proud that there is now a place for queer people in the industry to gather, to network. It's called the Q Space. It is a wonderful, wonderful thing, especially for me. I am a lesbian, and I had never really seen anyone who was out. Out and queer in the industry. It seemed like something we didn't talk about it. It was just what it was. You don't ever talk about those things, but now with this addition of this space, it's so intentional and it's so important. And there are multiple spaces. There are spaces for people of color. We have expanded our internal networks and our internal support so much. And it makes me so proud to be someone who can be seen, and knows other people who want to be seen, especially industry events. It really multifamily is a place for everybody. And I think that it makes me so proud to know that there are people who have the bravery, they have the intention to build those internal networks. But externally, it makes me proud to help people find a home because I know the stress of not having a home. I know the stress of moving. I know all of those stressors. But my favorite thing in the world, and I think about this every day when I do this, after I am done with work, after I shut down my brain, I go sit on my bed and I look at all the photos on my wall. And it's that deep breath. I can finally take a deep breath because I'm in my sanctum, my safe space. And we don't always get to provide safe spaces. That's not what we do. But a lot of the time, we get to provide some little slice of happiness, some little oasis for someone. And that makes me eternally proud that I was even tangentially involved in the process of that. It is it is my why. It is everything to me that people have homes and people can just take a moment for themselves at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, whatever time and space works best for them. And they can have, they can have their pets with them and they can build a life, and we can be some sort of a guiding light in the middle when they want to come home. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful every day that I get to be a part of it.
Oh, and that is beautiful. That's the word I was going to use. Just listening to you speak there, it's beautiful. Both parts of it, and our residents. Speaking of a place that's inclusive, our residents want to be able to identify with who they're leasing with a lot of times too, and it's great that the industry provides a space for folks to be able to live out loud and be their true and authentic self. For listeners who don't know about the Q space, tell them a little bit more of how they can get involved if they identify and would like to learn more.
Yeah, of course. We would love to have you as part of the Q Space. Of course, there is a LinkedIn group for the Q Space. You can also reach out to me, myself, and I. You can reach out to Justin Jones, Travis Block. There are plenty of people who would love to have you involved. There are different meetups at events. There are different webinars, things like that. We would love to have you. I think the best place to start would be that LinkedIn group. It's just the Q Space. It has beautiful branding, but it's really a place where you're free to be who you are. And that doesn't mean you have to be queer. You can also be an ally. There are different ways to be involved with Q Space. But it a little bit newer, not terribly new, but a little bit newer. And always want to get our name out there. Always want to invite people to be involved in such we're a really fun group of people. I don't know if you've heard, but we are very fun. So we would love to have you. You can absolutely reach out to me and I can point you in any direction.
Perfect. Now, I hope that folks will take advantage of that, especially because we are right here at two of our largest conferences of the year that will undoubtedly provide that time and opportunity for folks to meet up, to put people with the names behind the boxes on with their pictures in it on the screen, and be able to
Yeah.
get to know people and really forge those lifelong relationships. I feel like you and I see each other 10 years from now at an event, we're still gonna be like, hey,
Yeah,
and hugs. We just have
absolutely.
such a great opportunity to get to know. And you mentioned, people of color. There's Melanin and Multifamily.
Yeah.
The ladies there, and you can be an ally of them. Like obviously, I am too, and go and support their events. There's so many facets to the industry that we serve, and so much to look forward to. And is there anything in particular you're looking most forward to for the rest of this year?
I mean, Simone Biles, a little bit at Apartmentalize. Are you kidding me? I cried. So does that tell you how much I love her? I also I just joined a new team, so I'm super excited to just jump in and be a great part of the Radco team. My coworkers are incredible, so I'm super excited. And of course, I'm always excited for the Apartments of New York. We do have our annual conference. It's called Apartments Palooza in September, so always something that I'm pumped about, excited, but honestly, just excited to keep learning. I think that I want to be the eternal student, and so things like this, I just want to learn. I just want to learn and hang out and help people understand a little bit more about what it is to be a housing provider.
So in Vegas later on this year,
Yeah,
no
in Vegas.
less.
Yeah. Casually, it's fine.
Oh yeah, just in Vegas. It's great. It's be fine. We just get to see Simone Biles in Vegas.
Yeah, it's my first time in Vegas too, so it's just going to be an all-in-one good package.
Oh yeah, we're first timers too. Myself, and I'm hoping my husband can come out for a little bit of the week
Yeah.
there. But I think it's going to be a great time. And now that's a very positive thing. But is there anything that's keeping you up at night right now?
I think for me, there are a lot of things that keep me up at night.
I
But
think for me, there are a lot of things that keep me up at night.
our
But
we don't have support for mental health issues really in the industry. This is a very sink or swim industry. And in some ways, for some personalities, that's really positive. It gives you grit, it motivates you to learn and to do. That's the kind of person I am. But beyond the learning and changing and growing, that is uncomfortable for everyone. The likelihood that your property managers or anyone involved is going to be burnt out is 95%, right? And I know burnout is a buzzword right now and you hear it a lot, but the real effects of burnout are death. It's death, right? The stress that comes with running these communities, the stress that comes with trying to be supportive for your team whenever they don't know where to go. Being the one person, it's like being the default parent a little bit, is that mom, mom, help me. It's all of that. And then you go home to your personal life. And I know a lot, the thought process is drop it at the door. That's not realistic in the time we live in. So it is terrifying to me thinking about how many of my multifamily friends have come to me and said, I'm so anxious. I'm so anxious. I'm so depressed. I'm so confused. I'm so overwhelmed. Like I'm having health issues. I can't get a day off, things like that. The lack of owner operators taking mental health as seriously as physical health really, really does keep me up at night. There are plenty of resources. If you're listening to this and I'm talking to you unintentionally, there are resources everywhere. If you want to reach out to me, that I have many resources, but it is the responsibility of an owner operator or of a vendor or anyone to provide their team members with resources for mental health. If we do not do that, we will have less and less people in this industry, and the people who are wonderful and passionate in this industry will never return to it because it is too much for them. So I think that that's a huge thing that's been on my mind.
And properly timed too, with everything in the news. Just there's so much going on that impacts the industry, and from issues on local, state, federal levels to running the communities, the stresses. And if folks don't have like an EAP, something like that with their companies, that they are actively encouraged to pursue. And just checking in, it's so important to check in, because when you pour out of your cup, if there ain't much in there, you don't have
Yeah.
anything to pour from. And then what's left for family and friends. And you're right, it's so detrimental, and we're not going to have the longevity of good, dedicated people if the mental health of those on the front lines is not put first and foremost, because it's tough out there.
And if you've never heard of the 8 minute theory, I encourage you to look at it. Eight minutes could be the difference between life or death for someone with mental health issues. Um, it is when you tell someone you'll show up for them or you'll listen to them, please do. If you feel that there is something out of your depth, please help them find resources. This is vitally important. It's something that my birthday happens to be on World Suicide Prevention Day, so it's been a huge push for me. I've had many of my dear friends, and unfortunately, are not here with me anymore because they weren't given those 8 minutes, or they weren't given the resources that they needed. So please reach out if you need something. I might be a stranger to you, person hearing this in the ether, but I care about you. You are loved. You are dearly, dearly loved, and you are more than your job. You are not just this. You are a whole human being with more to offer than just being a manager or a leasing professional or a maintenance technician. You are more than all of those things. You are wholly a human being, and you're so loved. And if there is an instance where someone around you can make you feel
If
that
there is an
love, or
instance
a
where someone
stranger can
around you,
make you feel that way, please reach out and take that opportunity.
that's amazing. That the message is so timely, so timely. And just there's healing that can be found in opening up and to reaching out. And I think sometimes there can be healing in music too, and that's one of my favorite things. It's a stress reliever for me, and I always like to end our sessions on a positive note and hearing what is your favorite song, or do you have one, and why?
Yeah, I have a lot of favorite songs. I am a music girly, but one of my favorite songs, I actually listen to many genres of music, but I listen to heavy metal quite a bit. And people are like, "What?" Oh, that's me. But there is a song by Dance Gavin Dance called "Strawberries Wake," and the chorus says, "I want you to matter to you," and that's a big thing for me as I've gone through, a lot of life changes, realizing that the person I thought I was, maybe I'm not, or the person that I was, I'm not anymore. But the difference is that I matter to myself. And starting, people say that you can't love other people until you love yourself. And I don't believe that's true. I believe that sometimes loving other people is the only way that you can love yourself in some moments. But when you finally find a way to make all of that matter to you and make yourself matter to you, it will change your life. And I'm not saying it's going to happen overnight. I'm not going to say that, I have to wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say five nice things about myself every day. And there are days, more often than I'd like to admit, that I don't want to do that. I don't want me to matter to me. I want to push all of my love and energy out to everyone else in the world so that I can see their positivity and I can feel the love I give them. But at the end of the day, like you said, if you're pouring from an empty cup, you have nothing left, right? So starting with understanding how much you matter to yourself, and then using all of that love and care, and intentionality, and then giving it out to others, you'll find that you're a lot more. The cycle of love continues when you do that. So,
Well, that's amazing. You're putting it out there into the universe, and by design, it's coming back.
yep, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for that. And thank you for joining me today on this episode of The Real Spiel.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely and wonderful.
And I look forward to seeing you in DC.
Yeah, I will see you soon. I'm so excited.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of The Real Spill, a podcast where I spill on all things multifamily advocacy and how we as industry professionals can work together with our elected officials, stakeholders, and allies to bring about change for the rental housing industry. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've learned something new. Now, go be a voice. Until next time, Spills out.